Welcome back to Sahara TV. My name is Rodolfo Okonkwo. Nigerians will have been going to the polls today, voting for president. But last Saturday, the chairman of the Independent National Electoral Commission, INEC, Professor Jega, postponed the election to March 28. Our guest used the C word to describe that move. C as in coup. He should know. He's a senior advocate of Nigeria and a notable human rights attorney. Joining us via Skype from his Lagos chambers is Mr. Femi Falana. Mr. Falana, welcome to Sahara TV.
Thank you very much. It's my pleasure.
Let me start by asking you said there was a coup last Saturday. Who planned the coup and why?
Well, what I mean is that we have a constitution that has set out very clearly the duties on the Independent National Electoral Commission. By virtue of Section 76, 116, 132, and 178, it is the exclusive responsibility of the Independent National Electoral Commission to appoint dates for the presidential, governorship, National Assembly, and House of Assembly elections throughout Nigeria. Nowhere in the Constitution, nowhere in the Electoral Act, and nowhere in the Armed Forces Act is any role assigned or any duty conferred on the Armed Forces and the National Security Advisor as far as the elections are concerned. So when they took it upon themselves to blackmail INEC, to coerce INEC, to postpone the elections, for me, it was tantamount to a coup against the Constitution. And this coup was staged by the military chiefs and the National Security Advisor, who, by the way, advises the President on security. It does not advise the INEC chairman. And this is the basis of my submission of the unfortunate incident of last Saturday.
Now, on Wednesday, during the media chat, President Jonathan explained that he was not consulted by the service chiefs before they demanded or recommended a postponement of the election. Was the president lying, or is he truly not in charge of the country?
With profound respect, I do not agree with the president, because just a week earlier, at the meeting of the Council of State, summoned by him with a view to getting an endorsement of the postponement, he was reported by some of those who attended the meeting to have canvassed, along with the security chiefs who he brought to the meeting for postponement of the election. So it was, I was therefore flabbergasted when the president said on air that he never knew anything about the postponement. And if indeed that is true, then it is unfortunate that the Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces, the Chairman of the National Security Council, was not aware that security chiefs and the National Security Advisor conspired to cause a postponement of the election without taking the president into confidence. That itself is a very serious illegal action for which the president should call them to order and have them fired.
Yeah, because I wanted to ask you what happens now. Are we setting up this kind of precedents where if you don't want to have an election, you can say, the security chiefs can say, oh, we can't provide security for the country, and then there won't be any election. What should happen next?
I can assure you it's going to happen. It's not going to happen again, because these guys are already on the defensive, and none of them has challenged my claim that nowhere in the Constitution are they allowed to interfere with the functions of the Independent National Electoral Commission. So we hope it won't happen again, because there are decisions of our courts, of the Federal High Court and the Court of Appeal, to the extent that the armed forces have no role to play in elections in Nigeria. But the dangerous precedent is that military chiefs can, if allowed in future, hide under the bogey of security to say, sorry, we're not going to be able to provide security. Therefore, you cannot hold the election. But I can assure you, this will not happen again. Because we are going to challenge the claim so that it doesn't happen again.
Now, under
Section 5 of the Electoral Act, cited by the chairman of the INEC, you must have a cogent and verifiable reason to postpone an election. In an area or some areas, there's no provision for the postponement of general elections in the entire country under that provision of the law. So the INEC did not find the reasons cogent. The INEC was not in a position to verify the claim of the security chiefs. To that extent, Section 25 was wrongly cited by the INEC chairman, Professor Atayi Rujega.
All right, we spoke to INEC spokesman today, and he said that the election will go ahead on the 28th, that it won't be postponed again. But he mentioned that there is provision in the law. I want you to clarify this, that election can take place as long as it's 30 days before the handing over date, which is May 29th. If we have 30 days from March 28th to April 28th, don't you think that they can find another reason to postpone it and it will still be within the law?
We just had a protest in Lagos this evening. There was one in Abuja today. Both protests were organized by the United Action for Democracy. Nigerians are saying that they will not take any further postponement. And it's not just about 1 month to the election. The idea of having the election well ahead of that 1 month is to ensure that if there are rerun elections, you must have time to do that. So you can't have elections 30 days to the handing over day. That is dangerous. That is why the March 28th and April 11th should remain sacrosanct, so that INEC can have sufficient time in case there is a tie in the presidential or governorship election. And therefore, you will need time to conduct fresh elections or rerun elections or by-election, as the case may be.
All right, let's look at an issue in the news today. There was a report by Wall Street Journal that they interviewed the president and he called for the U.S. to send in troops into Nigeria. Now, I want you to discuss that in the context of this idea that in 6 weeks, which is now, we now have 5 weeks left, that they should secure the Northeast to the point that they should have an election. What is the president getting at? What does this mean, that he's now calling on the Americans to send in troops to Nigeria?
Again, that confirms the illegality of the postponement. If the president, as commander-in-chief of the armed forces, is now asking for foreign troops, whereas before now, the federal government has said, we do not want any foreign interference, we can handle this matter alone. But if they're now saying, please, they want assistance of the United States, when did the president get briefed? When did he come to that conclusion? Since he didn't know anyway about the postponement. And if his own troops, if his own security chiefs are saying they are competent to wipe out Boko Haram in 6 weeks, why should the president be asking for the assistance of the United States? These are all contradictions that go to confirm that these guys are playing on the collective intelligence of Nigeria. But we're simply telling them today, enough is enough.
Now,
enough is enough.
There is another concern of our viewers about the status of Jega, about the issue of when his term is supposed to expire and whether he could be sent on terminal leave. Now, I want you to address that as an attorney. You know, does the president have that power to say, we are sending you? Already he denied it. He said that the Jega should stay and conduct the election, but we know that things can change. But is there a power in the hands of the president to say, okay, you have to go on leave March 1st or before the election. Could that happen?
Well, I think it's important to appreciate that once the INEC chairman, the national commissioners, and the resident electoral commissioners are appointed by the president and they are endorsed, the nominations are approved by the Senate. They are not appointees of the president, but appointees of the Constitution, contrary to the statement made by the president in his media chat. These officials, these public officers, particularly the INEC chairman, cannot be removed, cannot be suspended, cannot be sent on leave by the president or the security chiefs, because it is well stated in section 158 that the INEC and its officials shall not be subject to the control or the directive of any person or authority, including the president, of course. And this whole idea of sending, it's a civil service, a policy. It has nothing to do with the Constitution. Under section 154 of the Constitution, the INEC chairman is 5 years certain, and until Jega completes his term on the 30th of June, the president has no power to interfere with the appointment. If he's going to have it removed, not suspended, because the Constitution does not mention the word suspension or terminal leave. If the president is desirous to remove the INEC chairman, he will address the Senate. He will present an address, and that address has to be approved by 2/3 majority of the members of the Senate before Jega can be removed.
Now, Mr. Falana, let me refer you to what happened to the former central bank governor, Sanusi Lamido Sanusi. Is this a similar situation? Because there were arguments that the president had no power to do what he did, but he did it anyway, and he left. So what would be the difference in this case?
The former governor of the central bank, Malam Sanusi Lamido Sanusi, the current emir of Kano, was not appointed under the Constitution. He was appointed under the Central Bank Act. Even at that decision wasn't tried. But what the president did on that occasion was to say that an investigation was going on, and he needed to, go on suspension to allow for investigation. It's totally different this time around. The Constitution is higher than the president, is higher than anybody. The president himself was elected under the Constitution, so he cannot toy with the Constitution.
All right, let's go to another issue about the NNPC audit that was sent to the president over a week ago, and we haven't had anything from him. Now, as an attorney, is there anything that anybody can do to force the president to release the content of that audit?
I've told a couple of my colleagues in the media that the law has left where you guys are. If there is any record in the custody of the government, by virtue of Section 4 of the Freedom of Information Act 2011, a bill that was signed into law by President Goodluck Jonathan, you have the power and the right to request for a copy of that report, and it shall be released within 7 days. And if it's not released within 7 days, the law allows you to file an action in court to ask for a writ of mandamus to compel a disclosure or the release of that report. Now, and I'm aware some action is being taken in that direction.
Now I know that the issue of the president's assets, some people went to the Information Act and they actually filed for that to be released, but it wasn't. So the issue is beyond will people demand for that, but will the government comply with the law?
Again, the government is not above the law. The government operates under the law. And the government has a political, legal, and moral right to operate under the rule of law. If there is a positive and categorical court order, the government cannot maneuver or filibuster about it. And we have cases in which we have obtained court orders to procure reports in the custody of the government. And this will not be an exception.
All right, let's go to another issue, which was a threat by the former defense minister, Mr. Obanikoro, to sue Premium Times, Punch newspaper, and Sahara Reporters over what is now known as Ekiti Gate. That's the audio of an attempt by Ayo Fayose and some other people to rig election in Ekiti. What is your take on that? I know that you believe that he's not serious about that threat. What is your take on the legal aspect of what should be done?
Well, since we operate under a culture of impunity, I'm not surprised if any of these guys attempts to go to court, whereas in some other crime, each of these guys will have been arrested and brought to book by now. But under the current political dispensation, anybody can get away with any grave criminality. But this time around, the Ekiti ballot gate is not going to be swept under the carpet. I do know that certain steps are being taken to have the military sharp reported to the military authorities, and all those who are indicted in that report. Because unless we stand up against such monumental fraud performed by some officials of the government and their courts, what is the assurance performance in the general election? Because was that the last fraud that broke the postponement of the election had to do with the revelation by the Sahara reporters of the rigging of the Ekiti election. These guys now have to go back to the drawing table because that was what they wanted to repeat all over the country. Now that they have been exposed, they need to go back to the drawing table and strategize this time around. This matter has to be pursued to a logical conclusion. I have publicly dared these guys to go to court. I will be ready to offer free legal services to defend any newspaper, any medium, or any individual that is sued, so that we can join issues with them, with those who have been indicted,
now,
and take an opportunity of the court process to have them exposed and even recommended for trial.
Now, we have Ekiti people who call our show, and they are frustrated that the government is not taking any action. And they want to know, is there anything that private attorneys like yourself could do in a situation like this, where we feel that something illegal happened, but because they are friends of the government is not taking action?
The government is not in a position to take any action. We're operating in an atmosphere of impunity in our country. We have never gone so low before, where drug barons, drug traffickers who have been declared wanted in some other countries are calling the shot here, So you can imagine how low we have sunk. But I can assure you this time around, I'm aware that certain actions have been taken on the Ekiti ballot gate, and very soon, these guys are going to be put on trial.
Okay.
Sooner than they think.
Okay.
Because the law also allows private individuals to set the engine in motion for the prosecution of criminal suspects under our law.
Okay, we are running out of time. Let me round up. In an interview with Premium Times, you called men like Edwin Clark, men with expired ideas. We had him on the show today, and he was still insisting that Jega should be fired. And he was threatening that the Jega is not being fair to PDP and their man, President Jonathan. So what do you think, how did we get to the point where the discussion in the country is dominated by men like Edwin Clark and Asari Dokubo and so on?
Well, I think it's part of this culture of impunity, where anybody can make outlandish allegations bordering on criminality. If you can threaten to cause a war on a country, it's treasonable. But because these guys are close to the presidency, they are allowed to walk free on the street. But with respect to Papa Clark and others, they are entitled to their opinions, and the president has shunned them. He has no cause to fire Jega. That means their allegations are be dismissed by the president. And what do they mean by saying Jega is unfair to them or the PDP or the president? The same Atahiru Jega conducted the 2011 election, and the presidential election was won by President Jonathan. Incidentally, the runner-up in that election was General Muhammadu Buhari. Jega never thought of the fact that, because I'm a northerner, I must declare somebody who didn't win the election the winner. And I haven't seen any change on the part of Jega. I've known him for more than 25 years, since he was the vice chairman, vice president, before he became the president of ASU, the Academic Staff Union of Universities. And he hasn't changed. So I can't see any basis for asking for Jega's head this time around.
Mm. Now, one last question. During the media chat, the president struggled to explain himself over the last statement he made previously that stealing is not corruption. At the end, he made it more complicated. Why is it difficult for him to understand or to explain to people that stealing is corruption?
Well, I think in the 70s, the late Fela Anikulapo Kuti had actually put an end to that controversy with his masterly record titled Authority Stealing. And that was when Fela said the members of the ruling class had devised various, stratagems to hide stealing, looting of the treasury. Whether you are talking of corruption, embezzlement, misappropriation, or whatever, or fraud, that all of them are features of stealing. Corruption is part of stealing. Money laundering is part of stealing. I do not know why the president got himself confused over, the difference. There is no difference between corruption and stealing. But what the ruling class do is to hide and to decorate stealing in a way that you do not regard them as thieves. But I'm saying that corruption, money laundering, and the rest of them are part and parcel of stealing. But I think what the president is trying to say, if you understand him very well, is that the regime has no time to waste. The regime is not bothered. There is no corruption in the country. The corruption is exaggerated. Therefore, nobody should lose a sleep, which is totally different from the general feeling, from the public perception, as well as the reality. The president tries to dismiss the allegations of corruption, in the government. And I think that is what he's trying to do.
All right. Mr. Femi Falana, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
All right. That has been Femi Falana, senior advocate of Nigeria and a noted attorney in Lagos, discussing the situation in Nigeria politically and otherwise. When we come back, we are going to speak to a senator from the Northeast, Senator Zena, who will tell us about the decision of INEC and how it's having impact in his region. So stay tuned.